Don, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you about research at West Virginia University and communicating research to your audiences, because it can be a really powerful and valuable tool in the toolbox of telling stories that have a tremendous impact on the communities across West Virginia and our region. I'm going to take just a moment to go through a couple of housekeeping items, just so you all are aware. We don't want to kill you with PowerPoints. So the way we've thought about structuring our session today is that Vice President King is going to present his information. It will be a PowerPoint. But then we're going to break things up a little bit, and he'll be able to answer any questions that you have. So please think about questions that you may have as you're listening and watching through his presentation, and he'll be with us to answer questions. And then after we do some Q&A with Vice President King, then Jake and I are going to move into a more tactical communications oriented presentation, and then we'll have some more Q&A with Jake and I after that. So just to give you an idea of how we're planning to structure the session over the next time that we have together. So without further ado, I want to take this opportunity to introduce our Vice President for Research, Fred King, who is a powerful advocate for research at West Virginia University, as well as the state and around our region. You'll hear from Fred about collaborations and partnerships, and he is a firm believer that we are not in this alone, and that is a real power that we have here in this part of the country. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to our Vice President for Research, Fred King.
Thank you very much, April. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with this audience. This is the largest audience I think I've met with in person since COVID, so it's really kind of interesting to get back into the swing of things. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on at the university in terms of research. I think it's important to point out, as April said, that everything we do in terms of research is really a collaboration. And it's a collaboration not only within WVU at Morgantown, but also with our partners across the state and across the nation. So you'll see that we partner with some of the other universities around, Marshall University, Fairmont State University, West Virginia State, Shepherd, West Virginia Wesleyan. The other thing that you'll see is that we partner with some of the facilities in the state. These are things like the National Energy Technology Laboratory, the Green Bank Observatory, the NOAA facility down in Fairmont, and some other facilities in Fairmont, as well as industry within the state. People like Toyota, they're a key part of what we do around the state, as well as the booming aerospace industry that we have growing around the Bridgeport area in West Virginia. When I came to the university 32 years ago as an aspiring assistant professor of chemistry, one of the things that really attracted me to West Virginia was we had a research university here that had not lost its commitment to its students or its state. And I think that's an important thing to think about the university. At WVU, we are a Research One university. I'll talk about that in a moment. But we're still very committed to working with our students, engaging them in the research process, and doing work, as President Gee would say, that has an impact, particularly in the state of West Virginia. And that really goes to that idea of what a land-grant university is, right? Formed during the Civil War with funds from land sales in the West, those funds were used to start up universities in all of the states. And generally, these are the state universities that you'll think of. In West Virginia, WVU has evolved not only to be the land grant, but also really the liberal arts university of the state of West Virginia. So we serve multiple missions. And then that R1 designation is something that comes out of the Carnegie Foundation for Higher Education. And so Carnegie classifies universities in many different ways, in terms of their undergraduate population, in terms of the breadth of the fields that they cover, and also in terms of their research engagement. And the way they measure research engagement is pretty straightforward, actually. They look at a few factors. They look at your research expenditures, how much funding you have that's spent in the area of research. They look at the number of doctoral students that you graduate each year. Because remember, one of the key products of research at a university is the talent we produce. All the research engages students, and it's part of their learning experience. And then the last thing it looks at is the number of staff we employ in the research enterprise. So that's what it means to be an R1 land-grant university. Next slide, please. All right. So sort of, this is the obligatory overview of the university. We are a comprehensive university. We have every academic professional program with the exception of veterinary medicine or architecture. And we do this with about 900 tenure track faculty and approximately another 300 what we call teaching faculty. Okay, these are full-time faculty whose primary duty is in the teaching area. Research is really the province of the tenure track faculty at the university. As April was talking earlier, our undergraduate enrollment is somewhere around 28,000 at the moment. Of those, we have about 5,900 graduate students. And then each year we will grant 6,500 some degrees. Of that, about 29% are graduate degrees. And again, that's important for a research university. Right now we will graduate anywhere from 180 to 200 PhDs in a given year. When I came to the university, we were always making sure we could graduate 50 PhDs in a year. So we've really grown that research enterprise over several years. When it comes to the research itself, a primary sponsor of university research in the United States is the federal government through the various agencies. Principal for us are NIH, DOE, Department of Energy, NASA, and the Department of Agriculture, and then the National Science Foundation. These are our primary sponsors. And as I was talking with April earlier, one of the things that we try to do in working with those agencies is look at the intersection of what the agency's interested in funding and what can have impact in the state of West Virginia. We employ about 1,800 people in the research enterprise at the university. And I think that's another thing that is worth noting because we tend to wonder about, okay, we're getting the dollars in for research, where does that go? About 50% really goes to employ people, to pay their salaries, and then of course that feeds into the local economy. Research itself in the academic world is measured by the output in terms of research publications, about 2,800 in the most recent year. And then the impact of those publications is measured by citations. And this is where the works that are generated are mentioned by others in their research. And we had about 3,600 citations in that year. Okay. So President Gee will often talk about the Mountaineer values, the things that are the hallmarks of WVU students that we want to associate with us. These are things like appreciation, accountability, service, respect, and then curiosity. The curiosity is the one that I like to think about because that really goes to the research itself. What drives us? What makes us think about what it is we're doing? And again, the research at WVU and at any university is really another extension of the education for students. The students are the one, by and large, who are conducting the research. The faculty may provide guidance, but day in, day out, it's the students who are the ones making the discoveries, thinking about the importance of what they do, thinking about how they communicate that to others, and then putting it in the larger context. And so you see that through the research enterprise, our students are gaining valuable experience that will serve them over the course of their life and their career. And I think sometimes we get lost when we think about research because we think of it as this separate piece, but really it's part of the whole academic enterprise. So again, we closely interweave teaching, research, and service at the university. Next slide, please. And what makes this possible is that students have the chance at an R1 university to work with faculty who are actively engaged in their discipline. When I was an undergraduate student, I went to a 4-year school, and I had great faculty. They really did a phenomenal job of teaching me. But the thing that you noticed was they perhaps were not on the cutting edge of their field. They weren't where the excitement was. They were teaching you the things that they had learned as graduate students, whether that was 5 years ago, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. At WVU, the faculty are engaged in their discipline. They're the thought leaders in their discipline. And I'm proud to say also at WVU, they work with the students, both undergraduate and graduate students. And you don't always find that at research universities. And so, here we have Professor Randy Nelson. He's an outstanding neuroscience researcher, works in the area of fundamental neurosciences, in particular sleep, and how sleep affects human beings. Professor Nelson started his career at the Johns Hopkins University. He was internationally recognized there. He went from there to the National Science Foundation to be a program officer, from there to the Ohio State University. And then he seized the opportunity to come to Morgantown and to be a founder of our fundamental neurosciences research program. He could be anywhere in the world, but he chose to come to Morgantown. And it's really because he saw in Morgantown the passion we have for working with our students and serving the state. Over here, Professor Maura McLaughlin, who some of you may have heard of before. Maura's an astrophysicist. Maura is recognized internationally for her work in the area of pulsars, pulsar detection, and the use of pulsars for the detection of gravitational waves. She's been recognized by the journal Nature as one of the top 20 up-and-coming scientists, and that was back in 2019. More recently, she was recognized by the Southeastern University Research Association as an outstanding researcher in the Southeastern universities. And the thing about Maura is she brings a passion not just to the research, but to the students. One of Maura's other things that she does is something called the Pulsar Search Collaboratory in collaboration with the Green Bank Observatory. Through this collaboratory, they engage high school students throughout the state and the region in the search for new pulsars. They give them the techniques they can run on their computers. And in fact, several years ago, one of those students discovered a pulsar, was invited to the White House and talk about their discovery. So that's the kind of exciting thing that we really like to see at the university. Next slide. So what we try to do at the university is really think about excellence and impact in our research. And so this slide is just sort of meant to give you the sweep of the things we do. You know, we have the person who wrote the book on the Nashville Sound, Professor Travis Steimling. Travis's area of research is really around Appalachian bluegrass music. And so he works with students every day who have an interest in not just becoming performers, but becoming students who understand the culture and the history of that music and what it means to our region of the country. We have Professor John Hu in chemical engineering. And you know, as a chemist, I appreciate this. You're probably looking at this going, what is that really? And so what John's work does is he takes methane from shale gas and he uses microwaves and catalysts to convert that methane into hydrogen, which you can't really see good here, and either carbon rods, carbon nanofibers. So he's taking the methane, the fossil resource that we have, converting it into a clean fuel, hydrogen, and also at the same time making the precursors for advanced materials. So through John's work, we're trying to see how we can take the shale gas and not burn it necessarily for energy, but use it for other purposes to revitalize manufacturing in West Virginia. And then down here, we have Professor Rezai. Some of you have probably heard his name. Professor Rezai leads our Rockefeller Neurosciences Institute. And Professor Rezai's passion is finding new innovative techniques to address neurologic diseases, and in particular the ones that seem to affect our population, whether it be addiction, Alzheimer's disease, stroke, things of that nature. And so what his group does is they're working on the forefront of these techniques to improve health of West Virginians. And I think that's the key point here. Our people are working every day within their mind helping West Virginians, but also helping people across the world. And people like Dr. Rezai, Dr. McLaughlin, Dr. Steimling, Dr. Hu, Dr. Nelson, they are recognized leaders, not just in West Virginia, not just in the United States, but internationally. And so we see people coming from across the globe, really, to get treatment in Dr. Rezai's laboratory. Next, please. All right, I'm going to go through now a few specific examples, okay? Not covering everything, but just a few that sort of come to mind about what's going on. One of our areas of strength is astrophysics. And that goes back to a partnership we formed with the Green Bank Observatory about 20 years ago when it was first put online. I think people forget that this observatory, nestled in Pocahontas County, a fairly remote area, it's put there because of the radio quiet zone. It is one of the most complex scientific instruments in the world. And people across the world know about that facility and make use of that facility. So we're fortunate enough that we have people like Professor McLaughlin, Professor Lorimer, Professor Spolar, who used the Green Bank telescope. We mentioned Mara's work earlier. Mara actually has one of 10 physics frontier centers in the United States. Hers is really focused on this gravitational wave astrophysics. Professors Lorimer and Spolar, they really are the people who first discovered these fast radio bursts. They're looking for pulsars, but they see these sort of flashes of electromagnetic radiation. They're not occurring in any kind of regular fashion. They're intermittent. And so there have been several articles in Nature and Science about these observations. They're still trying to understand what's the source of these. How do they relate to the formation of the universe? So that's a very interesting and exciting area for us at the university. Next, please. A relatively, I would say, new area for us, and also a new growing area of the state's economy, is aerospace. In the Bridgeport area, we have the aerospace industry that's growing. We have aerospace industry over in Rocket Center, which is just below Cumberland, Maryland. And so what you find at WVU is we're working in several different areas around this. First of all, our students are known for winning NASA competitions around robotics. 2016, 2017, 2019. The 2019 was really about how you would recover ice samples from Mars, from the surface of Mars. And so I think it's really interesting to think about students from West Virginia are the ones who've come up with the technique that NASA recognizes as the best for solving this problem. We have the NASA-supported West Virginia Robotic Technology Center. That's down at the High Tech Consortium in Fairmont. And if you've ever gone down there, for a while they had one of these robot arms from the space shuttle. They've moved on now. They're looking at how small robots can be used to refuel or repair satellites in orbit and extend their lifetime. And then that goes to this most recent NASA award. We're developing a small satellite center of excellence at WVU. We will be training people, working with industry, I think you may have read about this, in terms of developing satellite design, construction for small satellites in West Virginia. And then more recently, we have the Space Instrument Development Facility that's in the Department of Physics. And they're looking at designing instrumentation that would go aboard spacecraft. Part of this is to look at things like solar winds, space weather, in order to help flight. Now at the same time, we have folks in engineering who look at things like GPS-denied navigation. In space, you don't have GPS, so how do you navigate things? And so they look at things like how you get satellites or spacecraft to dock with one another in that region. And so there we have people like Professor Gross doing the work. Next. And I want to mention Professor Gross, like Professor Steinle, is a native West Virginian who went away, got their education, came back to the state, and now they're giving back to our students. An area I think that people really associate with our university is its history and energy. Again, you were founded during the Civil War. We grew up with the energy industry in the United States, really. And so a lot of our work has been in the area of fossil energy. We're now pivoting to cover other areas as well as that. This week in Morgantown, we will have the United States Biomass and Biochar Conference. And that's an outgrowth of this project that we have here, funded by the United States Department of Agriculture. $10 million. It's a collaboration between several universities, both in West Virginia and external to West Virginia, national laboratories, as well as private companies, looking at how we take marginal lands, like former mine lands, use them to grow crops that can be converted either to bioenergy sources or to be used to develop feedstock for chemicals and polymers. And so it's an important economic development opportunity for us, and it extends across the state. We also will be looking at carbon capture utilization. We're in partnership with NETL, developing new technologies for not just the capture of carbon dioxide, but how you then convert that into pure carbon that can again be used for making products, carbon-based products. This is another mention of Professor John Hu's work. Here's one of the forestry students who's working on the kinds of crops that you can grow in those marginal lands. Next slide. Perhaps the most abundant resource that we have in terms of natural resources in the state of West Virginia is fresh water. So we partnered with National Science Foundation funding with Marshall University, West Virginia State University, Shepherd University, to look at the impact of contaminants on groundwater across the state. This project started shortly after we had the incident on the river down here with the spill. They've looked at ways that you can monitor the stream so you can get early warning of these issues. They've looked at ways to detect biological species in the stream as an indicator of stream quality and health, and then thinking about mitigation strategies. The group in the Water Research Institute at West Virginia University, led by Professor Zimkevich, has done kind of the thing of taking lemons and turning it into lemonade. He has found a way to take acid mine drainage and, by varying conditions, extract from that rare earth elements. These are critical materials for technological society. These are the things that in nature are fairly abundant in the Far East. Right now, China controls the rare earth element market, and this is an issue for both economic and national security. What Professor Zimkevich has found is that through his process, he believes in the wastewaters of West Virginia from mining, there are sufficient rare earth elements that if we can extract them and process them, they'll meet our national security needs. So that's an important area, and we're developing partnerships with industry right now. We have an opportunity coming up to build a rare earth refinery in the state that would take Professor Zimkevich's starting material and convert it all the way over to those highly valuable rare earth elements. And then we had a group of faculty from both the sciences and the social sciences working on a policy paper. This was guidance that could be provided to our legislature, our members of Congress, thinking about the waters of West Virginia. What are some of the issues that we face in terms of protecting the water quality in the state? What are some of the advantages we have in terms of those water resources, both from an industrial development perspective, but also from a recreation and tourism perspective? And then that feeds into the desire to make West Virginia and take advantage of things like whitewater rafting, the natural beauty we have, to attract remote workers to the state and start rebuilding our younger population.
Your comment about cleaning up the streams. So when this process to get that out, would that be part of the plan that those streams would be, not just go in and get out what we need, but we'll clean this area up from years, decades of drainage?
Exactly. This will address that legacy problem we have with acid mine drainage. And again, you're going to be continuously collecting these materials from those streams as part of the cleanup process.
Very good. Thank you.
Yes.
Hydrogen hub. You obviously talked about
Yes.
some of the things that the university's doing in research with that, with carbon nanotubes, which is really exciting. Obviously, there's a hydrogen hub group. I believe WVU's involved with that, or part of that coalition. There's even going to be, I think, some money or tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act that's currently being discussed now in Congress today and in the Senate. What's the involvement with WVU in providing research and advice in regards to that hub?
So we're working very closely with both the state in terms of the government and in terms of various corporate entities that would form the West Virginia-based hydrogen hub. We see that really as an opportunity to, again, reignite manufacturing in the state, because the thing about the hydrogen hubs is you can generate the hydrogen, you have it there, but you need offtake nearby, whether that's using it to fuel things. And that might not just be the production of electricity, but it could be fueling a manufacturing facility, something like that adjacent. And so we really see that as something that we can contribute to through the research at the university, because we can take a lot of what we know about methane, coal, burning it, what have you, and flip that to think about how we use hydrogen as an energy source. Because the key thing is you need materials that can really withstand a corrosive environment if you're going to use it with the hydrogen. Another thing that I forgot to mention is our work around solar, wind, geothermal energy can be a big one for us. We're exploring the ability, do we have geothermal sources in the state that we can tap into and make use of as an energy resource? And then the final thing that's a little bit new and this is something that recent legislation has opened up for us, is starting to reconsider nuclear. We've talked with Westinghouse about these small modular nuclear reactors that they have, and they're very different from what we tend to think about as a nuclear energy facility. So we see that as something that could be very interesting, particularly in rural areas of the state, and provide a way to provide stability to the grid with some of these renewable sources perhaps fluctuate.
Is that something that you're currently doing much research on these mini reactors?
We are beginning some conversation with Westinghouse about this. You know, we always think about this in terms of how you get grid reliability. And this is just one other piece of perhaps providing that reliability with renewables. We also work in the area of batteries and fuel cells in that same regard.
Take advantage. Yeah, I was interested in what you were talking about in neuroscience regarding opioid addiction and stimulating the brain to reduce that or limiting that craving. That's something that can be therapeutically offered in anywhere near term.
I think, again, it's still in that clinical trial stage, because what you're doing is you're going through the process of trying these on patients who've agreed to be part of a trial, and then seeing what the outcomes are and how long that outcome lasts. So, you know, that I think was one of the first patients, the one I showed you there. So that's ongoing, but I think the indications are that this could be a very positive approach to this. But they're looking at other things as well as ways to address the addiction problem. Other questions? You guys are great students. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Fred, thank you very much for taking time this afternoon. And I know you have another engagement you're going to need to leave us for, so we appreciate your time this afternoon. And if any of you think of a question or something that you'd like to pursue from the information that he's shared today, please don't hesitate to contact Jake or myself. I'll have our contact information at the end of our next presentation, and when we chat a little bit about communications in a more tactical way. And we are happy to connect you with specific researchers, faculty members, students, or even with Fred for follow-up conversations, interviews, and stories that you might decide you want to pursue out of today's conversation. So we're happy to do that.
And again, I just scratched the surface today, so you know, please reach out anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, so now we're going to get sort of from the 40,000 foot view into the 400 foot view. And I'm going to ask our Director of Research Communications, Jake Stump, to join me. And for all of you in the room, Jake is a former writer and reporter for the Charleston Daily Mail. So all of us in our newsroom at WVU Today and at University Relations Communications are former news people. We come from newsrooms. We're former either writers, broadcasters, producers, assignment editors, or all of the above. So we are keenly aware of the demands on your newsrooms, of the things you might be interested in, but we are always interested in hearing more from you about what you're interested in, what your audiences are interested in, and how we can help to connect you, your reporters, your staff, to the topics and people that are going to have the greatest impact for you. That is our job. That's what we do 24/7. That's what we think about all the time. So please don't ever think that you can't reach out to us for some reason. We are here to help. I'm going to let Jake talk a little bit about the goals of good research.
Yeah, it's good to be amongst my old type of people. Not old in age, but, you know, journalists. So Fred gave you a pretty good view of the scope of research that's done at the university. So we're going to kind of boil it down on how to communicate and translate that research. So, you know, communicated research in science is kind of like a different beast in a way when it comes to writing and reporting. If you're writing about the house fire that happened down the street, people's going to, people's going to read about that. Or the new signee for the WVU football team, but how do you get people or readers or your audiences interested in science and research that happens at the university? How are you going to get them to tune into that? So of course you want to connect what happens in the labs to Joe Schmo's everyday life. How is the science and research relatable? And one of our goals is to also there's sort of that perceived disconnect between academia and the everyday person, so-called ivory towers of higher ed. So one of our goals is kind of like to break down that that perceived disconnect there and connect academia and research with the general population. So I have a video here. I'll let you guys go. Oh yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll just set it up. So you guys may recognize Alan Alda from MASH. I gave this presentation to some students, and they had no idea that what MASH was. So sort of like later in life, after he was Hawkeye Pierce, he sort of reinvented himself. If you don't know, he's sort of like this big advocate for science communication. They even named a college after him up at Stony Brook University, where they practice and teach how to communicate science. So this clip from The Late Show kind of puts into perspective why good science communication is important to the general public. So go ahead.
Just a moment, let me stop this. I'm sorry, when we lost power, I didn't realize we lost our connection to the speaker. It was coming out of, I don't think people back in the room could hear that though. I think only the people in the front of the room could hear that. Let's try this. See if we have.
And explain what they do so we understand it, so we can make decisions about what to fund and what to complain about and that kind of thing. But they also have to be able to communicate with one another. And for instance, I'm so proud that this Center for Communicating Science, which I helped start at Stony Brook University, teaches communication to scientists and doctors, nurses. It's important. Communication is so important in the doctor's relationship with the patient, for instance. I had the best experience with a doctor. I was in Chile interviewing astronomers on top of a mountain, and I got a wrenched gut. My gut got all caught up and was losing its blood supply. Within about 2 hours, I was going to be dead. So they took me down the mountain to this little hospital in this small town, and there was this brilliant surgeon there. And he communicated to me so beautifully. He said, here's what's happened. Some of your intestine has gone bad, and we have to cut out the bad part and sew the two good ends together. And I said, oh, you're going to do an end-to-end anastomosis. He said, how did you know that? I said, oh, I did many of them on MASH.
So here's another this neat little project that some researchers did, and why it's important to make scientists relatable. I think this was back in the 70s or early 80s. Some researchers asked, 3rd to 5th graders to draw what they envisioned a scientist look like. There's the stereotype that goes back to Dr. Frankenstein and all the evil scientists in the lab with their white coats, up to no good. So this is what they drew, which, you have keep out, monster inside on this slide here, and, that guy looks mischievous, whatever that is. So, yeah, they wrote messages on there like keep out, private, do not enter, go away, top secret. So, next slide, please. So, fast forward, I think 20 or so years later, they redid this experiment, but only this time they had the students draw what they thought scientists look like. And then they actually met a real scientist, and then they drew a picture afterward of what they look like. So as you can see here, in a before picture, one of the kids wrote, a scientist looks like a person in their 30s to 50s, has glasses, and is somewhat balding. So, and then after, the scientists were like me when I was little. The scientists played sports, hung out with friends, and also did not get straight A's. So that's kind of one of the goals that we strive for, is to make the scientists relatable and more approachable. So I'm going to I'm just going to do a brief rundown. So these are sort of like the principles that we abide by when we take on communicating research in our press releases and messaging. So we'll go down through these one by one, but this is a general overview of what we're going to get into here. Research communication is not academic or technical communication, despite what some faculty members may want you to believe. Research communication is translating science. It's not dumbing it down, which is another thing that faculty members are afraid that we're doing. Going back to demonstrating relevance to everyday life, it's got to tell a good story, and it's got to be accurate. So I'm going to kick this over to April.
So let's dive a little bit into principle number one. One of the questions we ask is, who's it for? And it's the same question that you ask as you're developing a story. Who is the audience for this? Who's going to care about this? And so what we always look at is, and what we come back to, is that research communication doesn't have to be academic or technical communication. It's communication, and it's sharing information about the things that have an effect on people in their everyday lives in some way. It might not be a direct impact, but it probably is an impact nonetheless. And one of the things that we do in order to achieve that is to hunt down jargon and kill it where it lives. So this has another one of those fun little video clips. So if you hover over the box, that is what we do to jargon. We toss it right out of the wrestling ring. So these are a couple of quotes that sort of, I think, speak to the difference. So if you look at the quote in white, participants read assertions whose veracity was either affirmed or denied by the subsequent presentation of an assessment word. Translated in gold, participants read sentences, each followed by the word true or false.
So April, how many professors say you just dumbed it down?
I didn't dumb it down.
How many say that?
If I take my car into a mechanic, I want them to explain the problem to me like I'm going to understand it, because they live in the world of being a mechanic 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I expect them to be an expert in fixing my vehicle. Same with a brain surgeon, same with someone who's studying astrophysics. I need them to talk to me in my world. And that is the way we relate it to faculty. You're an expert in your area. What you need to do is recognize that they don't live in your world every day. So when you're going to be communicating with people who aren't in your world, you need to talk to them in their language. And 9 times out of 10, the faculty get it. And one of the things we'll talk about towards the end is that's one of the reasons why, if you're looking to talk with a faculty member about research in particular, we really ask that you start with our office, because we know the faculty members who are better at doing that and those who aren't, because there are faculty at our university, like any institution, who are fantastic researchers and extremely knowledgeable in their areas of expertise, but could not explain it if their life depended on it. And then there are those who are also experts in the field and the top of their game, and they also are very good at relating what they know to other people. And those are the people we try to direct you to, because we know at the end of the day, you'll end up with a better story because your readers will enjoy reading about it more. So that's one of the reasons why we say, hey, start with us, because we kind of know who's good at this and who's maybe needs a little bit of work, and we work with them for the next time.
April slipped that in that wrestling video. She's a huge wrestling fan. Just kidding. So principal, yeah, riffing off of what April was just talking about, this is one of the things I tell faculty if they, like you said, John, how many of them, say, well, you're dumbing it down. I go back at them with, we're not dumbing it down, we're just translating it. We're translating it so, the average person, knows the importance and the significance of what you're doing in the labs, the research that you're doing. So I make that a priority to, tell folks, when they think we're dumbing something down. And you guys are journalists. You guys know, you guys have heard this before. You want to write on a, what is it now, 4th grade level, something like that. Or how would you tell a story to your mom or your neighbor? That's how we also approach, the science communication. Here's a Calvin and Hobbes strip that kind of encapsulates, I guess, the world of academic writing and jargon. I used to hate writing assignments, but now I enjoy them. I realize that the purpose of writing is to inflate weak ideas, obscure poor reasoning, and inhibit clarity. With a little practice, writing can be an intimidating and impenetrable fog. Want to see my book report? The Dynamics of Inner Being and Monological Imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study in psychic transrelational gender modes. Academia, here I come. So if you read a lot of these academic journals, some of that language will be like that. And one of the key points is trying to decipher the academic speak, because for better or worse, when I'm writing about research, it may be based on a research publication. So you'll have all this academic jargon you have to cut through and ask the faculty member, what does this mean exactly?
So for the third principle, we ask the question, does it matter? And that goes back to the question of relevancy. How is it relevant to the audience, to their everyday life? Let's be honest, we're selfish in that way, in a good way. What's in it for me? What's in it for the person I care about? Is my morning commute going to be made easier? Can I get the kids ready for school and out the door? Is it going to make them want to brush their teeth or eat their vegetables more? What is it that we can relate in their life to this work that will help them understand its importance and relevancy? You want to make them care about it. And so that's what we try to do. And we try to do that by finding a person who we can, pin that story around. And that's the same thing that you do as you're looking to write stories. You try to personalize it and put a face on that story so that it really does underscore the impact.
Say a principle 4, is it compelling? Yeah, this is something you guys, I'm sure you do with every story. It's just tell a story. You want to tell a good story, and that also applies to research communication, even if it deals with, something like astrophysics or, computational thinking. And it's also okay to, play around with it, be creative, just because the subject matter may be highly technical and dense. You can still have fun with it, introducing characters or, making some neat analogies or putting anecdotes in there.
And then finally, is it right? It's important when you're talking about research in particular, that it's accurate, that it's factual, that you don't oversell it. We see this quite frequently, frankly, in reporting about research. You know, one small, obscure study suddenly means we have a cure for cancer. You know, we need to make sure that we're being responsible in the way we communicate what a study, what results, what a clinical trial might mean. And I think Fred's response to your question was an example of that. He didn't want to oversell you that DBS was going to be the answer to curing addiction, but there are some hopeful signs. And so that's one of the things that we try really hard, especially when we're working with faculty members, and it's one of the things that you will probably come up against as you speak with faculty members about research. They're very excited about their research, but they are probably also going to be very hesitant to make any claims to you. They're going to be very conservative in the way they usually talk about what it means. And that's probably one of the first questions you're going to have, right? So what does this mean for the way we deal with acid mine drainage? Or what does this mean for national security? And they're probably going to give you a scaled back, more conservative answer, and that is because they don't want to oversell it. Because in their world, it's a step-by-step process.
So I thought I'd just go over a couple examples of how we approach press releases dealing with research coming out at WVU today. So we always try to tell a story. A lot of times, I'm sure you guys are bombarded with press releases that's like, so and so got a $100,000 grant, but it doesn't say what the grant is for, what it's about. So we make sure we tell a story and let people know what the research is about. So this is a story about this robot that was being developed over in our Statler College of Engineering by Dr. Ugu. So it's like a 6-armed robot called Stickbug that assists humans in greenhouse environments by pollinating crops. So this story originated because we caught wind of this $750,000 grant down here. But that's not the story. So whoever gets this funding, who cares if that's a story? That's not really a story. But what is the research behind that funding? So go ahead. That's fine. And here's another example. So this is similar to what Alan Alda had just discussed. I was trying to wrap my head around, when the whole variants popped up 20 years ago, it seems, out of COVID. We had plain COVID, and then we had these variants. So WVU teamed up with Marshall and the state of West Virginia to detect these variants, and they did it through genomic sequencing. And I'm like, what the hell is that? So I talked with one of the researchers involved, Peter Stoyloff, and he's one of the researchers that really gets it. Like, he's in the health sciences. English is a second language, yet he was still able to communicate very clearly what genomic sequencing meant by talking about putting together a jigsaw puzzle. And if any of the corner pieces were chipped, that sort of represented a variant. So recently, our research communications team has expanded. We've hired a couple of new writers to help us tackle, all the scope of research across campus. So these are sort of like how we engage with faculty. These are just some generic go-to questions that we have every time. Can you break down the title of your paper if they're talking about the research paper that's been published? What are the key findings? What challenge or societal problem is the research addressing? Who or what is affected? And how was the research conducted?
We talked a little bit ago about having some fun with research. And so this is another one of those great little slides that if you click down, has a video.
They don't really have behaviors to try to avoid people or predators. So because of that, when they're out, they'll just go anywhere. So they'll be climbing up your car, they'll be climbing into planes, they'll be climbing on trees and into bushes.
Something I never thought I would be working on with our team was a story about zombie cicadas and explaining this fungus, what it is, how it affects the way cicadas act, and in particular the way Brood X acted as it emerged a couple of years ago. This story from Matt and Brian went viral. Across the world, we had hundreds of news outlets from everywhere interested in talking with them about it. And in part, it was, I think, because, I mean, when you're talking about psychedelics and zombies, and when you're able to couch it in that sort of language, it immediately conjures up images of The Walking Dead and all these other things, which are very engaging. And that was one of the things that was very engaging. That sort of, you know, it's like a horror B-movie type poster was the idea behind this illustration that we created. So we had a little fun with it. You know, you've got your psychedelic mushrooms down here, and you've got the white fungus, and, you know, their hypersexual behaviors, and they mate with everything they encounter. They're the flying salt shakers of death. And you can't get much more imagery oriented than that. And it was one of the most popular research stories that we had coming out of 2020. And in a year when you're competing with a 100-year pandemic, that wasn't bad. So we wanted to share that example as something that is pretty complex and pretty niche, but you could have a lot of fun with and really make your audience be engaged with.
April, I think we'll steal that for next year's convention cover. The description.
So yeah, just wanted to almost wrap things up. We're not wrapping things up yet, but you know, with this quote that kind of aims for how we approach writing about research communications. This is a psychology professor who said the writer can see something that the reader has not yet noticed, and he orients the reader so she can see for herself. So going back over the 5 principles that we've sort of established for ourselves is: who's it for? Will they understand? Does it matter? Is it compelling? Is it accurate? So here are just a few, for your toolbox, a few resources, external resources that you can utilize if you're interested in science communication. There's the National Association of Science Writers, American Association for the Advancement of Science, and then there's the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science.
And then I wanted to share some WVU specific resources with you today. So I know we have some newer people in the room, and then we have some of our returning favorites, but for everybody, I really encourage you to check out and then bookmark wvutoday.wvu.edu. It is the news and information hub of West Virginia University. If you go to wvu.edu, that is our front page, that is our primary recruiting prospective student. If you're a parent of a student who may be looking at coming to the university, that's where you want to go. If you want to find out about what's happening at the university on a day in and day out basis, WVU Today is where we put the news. So that is research, that is all of our primary university level announcements, all of that good stuff, including all of our research stories are located there. We have an entire section right on the home page for research.
And April, I signed up for you. I gave them my email. You guys put them out too. They can
Yes.
sign up.
If you are not receiving on a almost daily basis, I won't say that every single day we have something going out, but it's pretty much almost every day. If you aren't receiving communications from WVU Today, let Jake and or I know before you leave today. We'll get you our card and let us know. It's has our email on it. We will get you on our email list for distribution so that you receive our news releases, media advisories, what I'm going to talk about here in just a second, our expert pitches, as well as our news digest, which is sort of the, hey, if you missed the other stuff because your inbox is flooded with things, here's a recap of the things that have posted to WVU Today in the last 24, 48 hours, for example. And we also share some things in the digest on behalf of some of our schools, colleges, and other units that we might not have posted from WVU Today, but we still think are relevant or important. Things from WVU Extension, for example, or maybe one of the schools over at Health Sciences, something that is specific to a particular part of the university, but maybe not what we would call a university-level communication. I also want to point out that we also have an experts database at WVU. We have a link to it at WVU Today. It's experts.wvu.edu, and it is a database of experts at the university in all sorts of areas who are media savvy. These are people who we have already identified as understanding you have a deadline. They can't wait 5 days to call you back or return your email. And when you say, hey, I'm hoping to have a Zoom interview by 4 p.m. today because I'm working on a turnaround of 7 p.m., they get it. So we have contact information. We have a little bit of biographical information on the background of their areas of expertise. You can kind of see whether that you think they're a good fit. And if you don't see somebody in the database for a topic, event, or issue that you're looking for, let Jake or I know, and I also am going to have the contact information for our Director of News, Shauna Johnson, who wasn't able to join us today due to a conflict, but we three are your primary initial contacts, and we will work to get you connected with somebody who can help. Dr. King, Vice President King, Fred, mentioned Mara McLaughlin as he was going through his presentation. Just a couple of weeks ago, we actually put out an expert pitch with Mara when the latest NASA images came out. And she talked about the importance of that discovery, those images, that information being available to scientists as it relates to the work happening right here in West Virginia at Green Bank. So if you were looking for a local tie for your readers to that sort of abstract idea that was making all of this national and international news, we sent an expert pitch with quotes already built in from Mara because she's on the front lines of it. And we put out expert pitches on things all the time. So look for those expert pitches. If we've put out a pitch with that person, they are already on notice that media may be contacting them. So they already know somebody might be interested in talking with them. The reason we put quotes in there, and sometimes we include an audio file, and sometimes we include even a video file, is because we know many times it might be a breaking news situation that you need to turn material quickly, either for your digital content or for your print content. So we want to be able to provide you with something that you could just rip and run with right away. But we also want to provide you with an idea of what that person is thinking, what their perspective is, so that if you wanted to contact them for an interview of your own to explore your own reporting, you have an idea of what direction that might go. And you can kind of decide, oh, I really think I'd like to talk to this person more. So that's our thinking in giving you that information up front. It's twofold. We want to give you something to run with right now in case you need it, but we also want to give you some insight so that you can do your own work on it as you have the time and resources to do so. And then finally, I'll just mention our WVU Research office, of which Jake is our head of research communications and Fred is the vice president, and we work very closely in collaboration with them.
April, I think also Crystal had asked about the research days too.
Yes. So this is our experts database. And this is where I said you'll find experts, experts.wvu.edu. For example, right now, Jorge Atiles, who is an expert in extension, outreach, engagement, all kinds of things. At the State Fair of West Virginia, starting next week. If you want to talk to somebody who's an expert, he's a great person. Hoda Gangaroa is phenomenal. Bridge collapses, infrastructure, road construction. When the condominium collapsed in Florida, he was our go-to. He is internationally known. When the Pittsburgh Bridge collapse occurred earlier this year, go-to guy, got tons of attention because of his work and innovative construction methods. And then Frankie Tack in our College of Applied Human Services, which is now our College of Applied Human Services. Frankie is another one of our opioid experts on more of the social sciences side. Has several programs on addiction studies that she works on, and it is fantastic. To your question earlier about experts and academic media days, in the before times, we would once or twice a year, usually once a semester, we would have what we called an academic media day. And it was based off of the idea of what you see for sports conferences, where like the Big 12, or the ACC or SEC has their big, day where all the players come and they're lined up and the coaches are lined up and they have their big media extravaganza. It was based off of that, only it was for academics, research, that kind of fun stuff. And what we would do is have a whole day, invite reporters in, have 4 or 5 presentations through the course of the day. Sometimes it was on a variety of topics. Sometimes we would structure the whole day around one topic: climate change, social justice. We did opioid and addiction one time. And then in between each presentation, there would be opportunities for reporters to pull that faculty member aside to do one-on-one interviews, follow-up questions, that sort of thing. During the pandemic, we've obviously put that on hold, and now we're looking at reinstituting something similar. And one of the things that we wanted to sort of gauge from you all today is, what would you like that to look like as we go forward? I know that it can be really challenging to have people pulled out of your newsroom for an entire day. And so one of the things we thought about doing was, instead of doing something once a semester that was a whole day, what if we did something once a month? And that monthly event was, maybe 2 hours, like an 11 to 1, over a lunch time period. And it would, focus more on 1 or 2 faculty members. And they would give a presentation. You'd have the opportunity to do your one-on-ones and follow-ups. And it would be much more targeted to 1 or 2 topics, issues, or event-related type things. We'd like to do them in person, only because we really feel like that provides a better opportunity for you to get to know the faculty member, the expert, really engage with them and drill into something that you'd want. And it provides that opportunity to get to know people. But we'd also be open if you all really feel like a virtual option needs to be a part of that. We certainly understand the challenges of travel, the cost associated with all of that. So we are both open to hearing your thoughts on that today. And that was one of the things we were hoping that we could kind of chat a little bit about. What do you want? We want to do what's going to work best for you guys.
I think one of the flies in the ointment with just having it for a couple of hours once a month is still, it's going to take an hour or a little bit more for like folks in Wheeling to get to Morgantown and back. So if you're now taking the 2-hour thing and turning and adding 3 hours to it because of travel. So now regardless, it's still going to be a full day. So I think I think it would be easier as an editor to say, well, once a semester,
You can dedicate.
I'm going to dedicate a full day to having someone down there, as opposed to once a month, I might have to lose somebody for 5 hours, which is essentially it's a full day as it is. If you guys do want to do like a more monthly thing, I honestly think a virtual thing would be good, because I'll be honest, when COVID hit and I was still working sports, and the guys from Sports Info would get us Stratford and Neil Brown and Huggy and all those guys, that was really, really good, because it allowed us to just kind of have them and give us that opportunity to just not have to spend the whole day and still get like tons of parade information. So I think that if you're looking at maybe a more frequent thing, I think a virtual component would probably be a good idea.
Maybe what I like in person, I think monthly is not a burden, but I think that maybe it's a semester, once a semester in person, full day program, but maybe like a monthly, compared to a lunch with books type thing. That's a virtual thing that folks can tune in on a relevant topic that's rare earth minerals right now, something like that. But I do like that one time at least each semester going down and getting with Fred and others and learning about deep brain stimulation, which I think was the first one that you did back with the Bolus deal, which is, still to this day is fascinating to me. So maybe something like that would be a good alternative that still keeps an in-person option, but you can make a full day commitment out of it, that you can string out over a week of stories, but then maybe a monthly virtual option that folks from around the state could also tune in without a huge commitment.
Okay. Anyone else?
To give you some insight, April, so I promised I would. And for you guys, our event, this is our first event back, so you're starting back. We were about probably 60% what we expected, but we've lost another 10% during the 3. People called and said, hey, I can't come. So we're going to be probably below what we would have expected, 50%. Now this is our first time back. We lost 10% to COVID this time, and we expect it to be more. But we've learned that, okay, getting started up again the numbers just aren't, at least right now, weren't there. Part of it is people have other commitments now. Yours is a little easier. Ours is a couple days, and it's travel in a hotel. But I think that people fill the gap. There's no one left that day open on their calendar. So we'd have to reopen it. But we'd be glad to work with you on it. We encourage you to do whatever you can. We'll partner in every way we can. But I want you to have the data that we had to share.
Anyone else?
Yeah, one other thing might be good. The sessions over those few years that when they were in person were great, but they were lectures. Field trips are great, so even if it could be going into a lab as part of that day and seeing some things firsthand, as opposed to just 6 hours of sitting in a room like this, it does get a bit dull after a while.
Okay.
As someone who attended a lot, it's going to.
And that leads me to another question I had. We've done them both ways. Do you prefer a day that is more catered around one particular overarching topic that has maybe some specific things built in as angles to that one overarching idea, or do you prefer to have something that is more of a variety show? Variety show?
I've covered those. Variety show, I think, is pretty good. Like, you just hit so many interesting topics.
Okay. Well, that's helpful for us to know, too.
Yeah, and you give us, even on the variety show, if we had one speaker, you always gave us 4 or 5 other resources that if we wanted to spend more time on that one topic, we could get there.
Okay. This is very helpful. This is what this is what we were hoping for. So, next slide. Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things we also were asked to share, and so we wanted to make sure we fulfilled that promise, was just some social media best practices that we use that we thought might be helpful, especially as it relates to research. So I'll let Jake run through those, and then we're going to just open it up for questions generally of whatever you're interested in knowing about, and we will be happy to answer those questions.
So yeah, we know that the role of the reporter has evolved. You guys are now like Jacks and Jills of all trades and have to do social media and those sorts of things. So these are some practices that we abide by when we're posting on social. Is it written for your audience? Just think about the tone and the content. For example, if you look at our main WVU social accounts, are a little more geared toward students or recruiting, while something like the research office Twitter account will be a little more serious. Am I informing my audience or bothering them? So make sure your content is worth posting. Am I submitting my post at the right time? So if you use like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the big three, they have free analytics and insights you can look at there to see when are good times to post. What do you want your audience to do? Do you want them to click on a link, look at a photo, answer a question? Just think about those sorts of things. Did I link where appropriate? So consider where you're directing the audience. Can I integrate a photo or video? So the zombie cicada video that you just saw was a social media post. So that's one of the ways to utilize social media is through like visual imagery, photos, videos. And those are more likely to gain attention. And obviously, check the spelling and grammar. So yeah, here's our info. And yeah, we're happy to take any questions you may have, or feel free to reach out to us at another time.
As I said before this session began, I understand that we are the only thing between you, cocktails, and barbecue. So we are here, and we will answer any questions you have, and we'll stay for as long as you'd like. So if you have questions, please ask us, and we'll do our very best to answer them. What can we help you guys with? Or what questions do you have?
I just wanted to say on the zombie cicada topic that I work for the Morgan Messenger newspaper up in Morgan County. It's a small newspaper on your, would not even be on your radar, but when we were looking for an expert on the cicada emergence, somebody that I couldn't even tell you, it was probably one of your hotshots there, who was gracious enough to call us back and talk about their research and just explain to the general public the process of that. So I wanted to thank you for, we're not going to make you go viral, obviously. CNN News is going to, but as a small weekly paper, we appreciate having, that gives our story a little bit of heft for our readers, if they feel like they have a connection to WVU, even if, it seems a little further away.
Is it possible for you to pull up our main WVU Today page on here? We know the importance of and the need for you all to do your own independent reporting, and we respect that. I wanted to pull up our main WVU Today page because I wanted to point out a few things that I want to make sure we provide as a resource should you want or need to use it. This is our main page today, and obviously you have home. If you click on the All Stories button right next to it, it will literally just take you to a running list, if you scroll down, of our latest stories as they've posted in chronological order. And if you go back up to the top and you go to expert pitches, this is our expert pitches. The last one we put out was on Thursday, and it was about the burn pits We have somebody who is an expert in inhalation, toxicology. Tim Nurkowitz is a superstar in that area and had some great things to say. And you can find all of our expert pitches as we kind of chatted about before. Beside that, you'll see up at the top, we post all of our media advisories. We don't do as many media advisories, especially over the last couple of years, because they're related to events most often. But when we do have them, they are here, and you can always go back and reference them in the event that you are looking for something. If you go back to the home page, I'm going to have you scroll down just a little bit. And so this is our feature at the top. It's usually like the latest, it's not always the latest thing, but it's usually like the thing that we think most people are most interested in. Right now it's move in, welcome week, start of the semester. If you want to know what's going to be happening, you know, starting on August 11th, the craziness that ensues, that's it. But if you scroll down, you'll see we have a latest headlines section. You can search for a story. If you know, I know they did a story about zombie cicadas, but I can't remember. You can search for it. You can search for all the stories that are on our current page. You can also search for all the stories from WVU Today prior to 2017 when we moved to a new platform. We archived everything that was on the old website 2017 or earlier. So if you're looking for a Board of Governors story from 2015, guess what? It lives there, and you can find it. You'll find videos that we do from inside WVU Today. Often these are interviews with people around campus about topics that are going on. We also have WVU Today on the radio, which is very similar. So if you're looking for audio content, this is great extra for digital if you're looking for it. If you go down lower into this next section of our homepage, we have links that you'll find for our Office of Research, our Health Sciences Center, our WVU Extension, Foundation, WVU Sports, Athletics, our Alumni Association, and then if you click on that last one that says Colleges and Schools, we've created a page with each one of our colleges and schools within the WVU system, including Kaiser and Beckley, WVU Tech and Potomac State. And if you click on any one of those, if you go to, for example, Potomac State College and click on that, it will take you to their website. And you can learn about what's happening at Potomac State. If you arrow back, you can also read stories on WVU Today that relate specifically to that college, school, and so on. Go ahead and arrow back again. Also wanted to call your attention to this lower section here. These are where all of our expert pitches are located. You can learn more about our top research stories. So you can search our research stories, you can search our story pitches, you can find our experts database right here off the home page. And if you click down, I also wanted to take a moment to mention this. West Virginia University is a founding partner with The Conversation. And I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with it, but The Conversation is an international news source seeking out academics who provide independent, high-quality, authenticated, explanatory journalism. It must be based in research. No op-eds, no opinion. It must be based in research. And if you click Read Stories, you will see stories that our faculty have written in consultation with the editors at The Conversation. And The Conversation is partners with the Associated Press, among others. And so if you are partners with any of these platforms, you have the ability to utilize content of The Conversation in your publications. So it might be something of interest, especially if you're a smaller or weekly, or if you're looking for content to beef up particular sections or digital content. This might be something that you'd want to explore. theconversationus.com is their website, their homepage. This is WVU's page on their site, theconversation.com. And you can see we just had a piece talking about inflation. And you'll often see these pieces showing up in publications around the country and around the world. Go ahead and scroll back one more time, and I just wanted to real quickly make sure I didn't miss anything down towards the bottom. We have links also for WVU photos, video, etc. Scroll back up to the top, and we're going to go into a story, and I wanted to point out one thing. If you go to this top story and you click on it, if you scroll down right here, you'll notice this says download full size. If you click that, it will take you to a high resolution downloadable version of that image. You are free to use them. Everything we post on WVU Today is public open source. It is for your use. So if you see a photo that we've put there, you can use it. You can download it. If you go back, we also include cut lines and courtesies. So if you go back, you'll see we've included a cut line and a courtesy, and the same is true on the sidebar as we have additional photos that you can choose from. That is true of every single story that we post. So please keep that in mind. If you are looking for resources to use, we try to provide them for you so that you have them. I know sometimes I get questions about that. Folks want to know whether they can use it. And if you want to know, those are also, by the way, every news release that we email out. So if you're on our distribution list, every headline that you see in our emails are hyperlinked back to the WVU Today story. So if you click that hyperlink from the email, it will take you to this story so that you have immediate access to then the photos, the downloadable, and you'll see an editor's note at the top of each one of those email distributions that tells you, are there photos, is there video, is there audio, are there graphics or illustrations or PDFs or additional information that might be available that you could utilize. Any questions about any of that good stuff? All right. Thank you very much for your time and for allowing Jake and I to chat with you, and we will let you get to cocktails and barbecue and sunshine and all that good stuff ahead of tonight's dinner, but just please know that we are here to help, and we've been in your shoes, and we want to make your life a little bit easier if we can. We have business cards if you need or want them, and in the meantime, it's great to see old friends and meet new ones.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.